All right, let's talk AI now. Artificial intelligence is not just transforming how businesses operate, it's now reshaping how they buy technology. Globally, companies are beginning to move away from long-term software contracts that once locked them in for years. Instead, they're demanding shorter, more flexible deals driven by the rapid pace of AI innovation and the fear of being stuck with outdated systems. This shift could have major implications from how global tech firms do business in Nigeria to how local startups compete and scale. Joining me for this conversation now, we have Mr. Tumi Akande is Associate Director, Tech Platforms, KPMG, West Africa. Good morning. Great to have you.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So, it's quite interesting seeing what's playing out right now with, SaaS, that's software as a service, and the disruption is getting from, artificial intelligence at this point with, companies globally, cutting their long-term obligations they normally have to some of these, software companies. Talk to me about what's playing out so far. Do you think these firms, these global firms, are becoming too reactive, to the AI trends?
That's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily call it reactive. What we've seen is what I'll tag as strategic adaptation, especially in this side of the world, Africa and then Nigeria as a whole. In fact, there's a recent study that KPMG carried out, and we've noticed that over 70% of organizations in our continent are already thinking about artificial intelligence and how to adapt that into their business functions, right? Of course, the SME is that's a different ballgame entirely. For small and medium enterprises, for them, it's really they have no options right now but to start thinking consciously about how to infuse artificial intelligence into the key aspect of their businesses, sales, finance, and the likes. So it's we're not reacting, we are responding and adapting strategically.
Yeah,
that's what research shows.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You're seeing the way some of these software stocks were impacted earlier, due to AI disruption there. And looking at the shift we're seeing so far when it comes to some of these contracts, contracts are shifting from 3 to 5 years to about 6 to 18 months. That, some of these long-term contracts that these businesses have, with these software companies, we're seeing rise of pay-as-you-use, AI pricing. Up to 70% of companies reviewing contracts due to artificial intelligence. Enterprise tools are now updated monthly and not, yearly. And we know the key players driving the shift there: OpenAI, Microsoft, Google. And definitely, this still, boils down to importing technology at this point. What do you think local startups can do to, plug in here, try to get some business out of this?
I think you've actually said it all. These are the big boys in this field. And if you look at what they are doing, I think between them, this year and maybe some other players that are not listed here, for just 2026, about 650 billion is set aside to play in this field. So can local startups play that capital game? The answer is no. However, if we look at the entire artificial intelligence stack, take a bird's eye view, you see that there are 4 major components. There's infrastructure, which is where these players, hyperscalers, are investing aggressively. There's the model itself, which is the real logic, is the algorithm running behind the scene. And then we have data. And lastly, applications or business solutions. So where local players can thrive is the data, because then we have the local nuances. We understand the local terrain. Right? For example, data around our languages. How do you translate? How do you leverage artificial intelligence to speak Hausa, Yoruba, or any other language around us? and then certainly business applications where the local players are building for the local market, solving local problems. If we approach it that way, yes, we can compete really favorably. But playing the capital game where we have to churn out 650 billion for infrastructure and compute, at this point, I'm not sure, and I don't believe we're ready for that particular phase of the game.
Yeah, it's quite interesting seeing the amount of money some of these companies are spending on, developing AI, at this point and the infrastructure. But, looking at some of these companies shifting from, long-term contracts to short-term contracts, does short-term contracting, does it reduce costs? Or is it something that increases costs over time?
It's a balance. I would say it's a fine balance that has to be, and it's a journey to run very carefully also. For large corporations, what we will see is that large corporates have to think about it really strategically. If they look at the entire IT landscape, a portion of it is changing really rapidly because of the rate of innovation, especially around artificial intelligence. However, there are still some stable portions that have been around for a long time. So it's a balance, and what needs to be done is the part that is not changing too often should be maintained. The portion that is changing rapidly, that one, like you mentioned earlier in one of the slides you showed, they can go for shorter contract life cycle. However, the more stable portions can stay. For SME, it's slightly different though, because they may not necessarily have the capital to even use for long-term commitments. So what they need to do is look carefully at what the key aspects of their business, finance, sales, customer support and customer experience, and any other key functions they might have, and look at how they can infuse short-term contracts, how they can leverage that to boost operational efficiency, time to market. So that's how I would, that's the best way right now to approach it.
All right, and
there's
talking
no
about
one size that fits all.
Yeah, I'm talking about the best way, to approach it. Do you think there's some kind of balance, businesses should, adopt, when it comes to, being flexible with some of these, with a long-term strategy? Do you think there's a better way to do it? Because I'm just imagining I'm a business right now. I don't want to get, stuck in a contract for, 5 years. Yeah. So I say, you know what, I'll just do a few months. But what if that technology is not meeting my expectations somehow, or it was meeting my expectation previously, but it's not meeting it anymore, and now I have this short-term obligation with, some of these, software platforms? How do I balance this, really?
Good question. There's a good balance, right? The first one will start from how you even train the workforce. It has around artificial intelligence, that is, right? It's no longer the nice to have. Every organization that wants to build for the future needs to be very conscious about the workforce strategy and how artificial intelligence can augment what they presently do. That'll be the first one. That is the foundation for the balance we're trying to create. On the other hand, for larger organization, identify the aspect of the business that really needs to transform rapidly, right? And those are the ones that we can leverage some of these short-term contracts for, artificial intelligence contract for. As you mentioned earlier, innovation is changing rapidly, right? So you don't necessarily want to get stuck. Neither do you also want to get locked into a particular vendor. So technologies that will be adopted need to be open, right? Need proper roadmap that builds for the future. And then you think about how do you integrate this into your business. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the other balance is there are certain aspects of technology that have been around for a while and will continue to be stable, right? Some of the core system will be stable. If it's a bank now, they won't just change their core banking because AI is here. right? However, the way they engage their customers, if it's an energy company, a power, a disco, the way they engage their companies, their customers rather, they can be really innovative around that and leverage some of the short-term contracts for that. But the balance needs to be looked at really carefully. Proper introspection is necessary.
Right, and definitely we've already seen the reactions in major markets at this point when it comes to some of these software companies. Their share prices have dropped a lot, with the AI disruption, so far, or what major analysts are seeing would be a big disruption, for their business, going forward. But how are you seeing this disruption going forward? Is this something that might not really happen? In the future, talking about AI disrupting, software as a service?
It's here to stay. It's here to stay. The same way the internet disrupted businesses in the late 90s, early 2000s, is the same way artificial intelligence will disrupt businesses tremendously, such that organizations that are not thinking about it might get outpaced significantly by organizations that are leveraging artificial intelligence to boost operational efficiency, time to market, and productivity. So it's here to stay. Businesses need to start looking at it seriously.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's a good place to leave it. We talked to Mr. Tumi Akinade, is Associate Director, Tech Platforms at KPMG West Africa. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me.